You say no to something simple. They push back. So you explain. Then they push again. So you explain again. By the third reason, something shifts. You're not defending a decision anymore. You're asking for permission to have one. That's the loop most people never catch. The first explanation is honest. The second one is already a negotiation. Catch that second reason before you give it, because that's where the boundary slips. When you explain the same decision again, you stop communicating your choice. You start asking for permission to have it. One explanation is yours. Two hands them the vote. And once you're asking for permission, the boundary is already in someone else's hands. That's where it went. Not when you said yes. Right there at the second sentence. The conversation can end. They can walk away. But you're still inside it, going over what you said, wondering if you explained it right, whether they're upset, whether you came across as cold. You weren't cold. You made a decision. I can't make it. But that's not what it feels like. What it feels like is you had to explain. Like the explanation was the price of having an opinion. Most people who over-explain didn't start this way. They got here through practice. A longer answer smoothed things over when you were younger. An extra reason meant less tension in the room. An extra apology meant the conversation didn't end cold. It worked, so it became the move. And for a long time it kept the peace. But keeping the peace and setting a boundary are two different things. One holds a relationship together. One holds the decision. Problem is, it also became the cost of having a standard. Every decision that needs defending twice is a decision you're auditioning. Every no that requires a second explanation is a no on probation. You feel that cost, not only in the exhaustion, though that's real, in the smaller thing underneath it. The feeling that your answer has to earn its place, that it doesn't belong to you until someone else accepts it. Every time you explain yourself past the first round, you're not only tiring yourself out, you're teaching them that more pressure gets more information, and you're teaching yourself that your first answer wasn't enough. That second round costs more than the energy it takes. The first answer loses the weight it was supposed to have. A boundary sounds like, I can't make it. 3 words. Yours. An over-explanation sounds like, I can't make it because I have a family thing, and I've been tired this week, and I know I keep saying no, but that's a request. The decision isn't yours anymore. You've opened a negotiation. So why is it so hard to stop at the first sentence? The trigger is almost always one sentence. Are you sure? Can't you make an exception? I need this from you. That's it. One sentence from them. And before you've decided how to respond, your mind does something with it. It gives that sentence a meaning before the conversation continues. The meaning is this: you haven't explained yourself enough yet. If you had, they'd have accepted it. So you explain again. Work context. You told your manager you couldn't take on the extra project. Your plate is full. You have 3 deadlines landing in the next 2 weeks. You said that clearly in one sentence. They come back with, we're counting on you for this. 3 seconds later, you've started in on your workload, your other commitments, your deadlines for the quarter, your health if you keep going at this pace. By the second reason, you're no longer saying no. You're asking to be excused from saying no. Your mind is looking at the first sentence you gave and marking it insufficient. If it had been enough, they would have said okay. It wasn't. So the second explanation goes in. The third. By the fourth, you can feel the shift. You're not protecting a decision anymore. You're defending the right to make one. Watch what's happening in your head while you're adding reasons. You're not convincing them. You're convincing yourself that you're allowed to have this boundary. Because the doubt isn't really about whether they understand your workload. The doubt is about whether a person who protects their capacity is letting people down. So the second reason is for that doubt. The third is for the part of you that already started second-guessing. One sentence from them. Your mind turned it into a signal. The first reason wasn't sufficient, so the search starts. You're looking for the reason they'll finally accept. And as long as you're looking, the boundary is open. After the conversation ends, you replay it. Was there a better way to frame it? Would a different reason have landed cleaner? The conversation itself was 3 minutes. The replay runs for the next 2 hours. Family context. I'm not going to be there for the holiday dinner. Simple, yours. They respond with, you never come anymore. And now you're explaining your calendar, your schedule at work, how exhausted you are going into that stretch of the year, your intention to be there for the next one, how much you value time with the family, which shouldn't need explaining, but you're explaining it. Second reason in third. And somewhere in the fourth sentence, you feel the shape of the conversation change. You're no longer the person who said no to the dinner. You're the person on trial for saying no to the dinner, and you're arguing your own case. Different setting, same ship. A decision that was yours became a position you have to defend. The moment it happened, the second sentence, not when the conversation started. The second sentence. Social. You skipped a gathering. Again, one word. And you're 2 minutes into your schedule, your energy, your apology for the one you missed before this one. That's the cycle. One sentence from them. One meaning your mind assigns, I haven't said enough yet. And then you're in it, looking for the version of your decision they'll finally accept. But there is no such version. When someone wants you to change the answer, no explanation gets you there. The explanation was never the path. Stopping at the first sentence was, and that cycle runs in both directions. Every time you explain yourself past round one, you teach them that more pressure gets more from you. They don't plan this. They learn it. Pushing gets another response. Another reason. Another round. And you learn it too. You learn that your first answer needs support. That a no requires a reason. That the reason needs backup. That the backup requires an apology for the last time you said no. What gets quieter in each round is the weight of the first sentence. The one that was supposed to stand on its own. The one that was yours. The trigger was one sentence from them. The loop was every sentence you added after it. And notice this. The loop doesn't end when the conversation does. It ends when the replay ends, which usually isn't that same evening. Sometimes it runs for 2 days. The conversation was 3 minutes. The cost ran much longer. Seeing the cycle doesn't stop it, because the pull to explain arrives before you have time to decide. Go back to the moment your manager said, "We're counting on you for this." One sentence. 3 seconds of speech. That's all that happened. And in the space between that sentence and your next word, your mind did something. It processed what they said and gave it a weight, a meaning. Something like, this wasn't a good enough reason to say no. Or, if I handled my capacity better, I wouldn't need to protect it. Or saying no to something they need makes me the kind of person who lets people down. That reading arrived fast. Fast enough to feel like a fact, not a choice. Fast enough that you were already adding the second reason before you'd decided to. But it wasn't a fact. It was a reading, your mind's first take on a sentence. And your mind's first take on someone's pushback is almost never about the validity of your decision. It's about what you're afraid that decision says about you. When the reading says something bad about you, the automatic response isn't to question the reading. It's to fix the thing the reading says you are. If the reading is, "This makes me look like someone who lets people down," the response is to prove that wrong. That's what the second explanation was. Not information, defense of character. And the second explanation doesn't resolve the reading. It feeds it. Because if one explanation had been enough to prove you're not the person who lets people down, you would have stopped there. The fact that you kept going is the mind still unconvinced, still searching for the explanation that finally clears the reading. There isn't one. The reading doesn't clear through more words. It clears when you stop giving it evidence that it was right. And the evidence it runs on is every second explanation you've offered. In the family context, when they said you never come anymore, your mind didn't process that as information. It processed it as a verdict, a ruling on who you are. And rulings require defense, not information, defense. When someone implies you never show up, they're not asking about your schedule. They're raising a question about who you are. And the automatic response to a question about who you are is to prove them wrong, which is exactly how the second explanation turns into the fifth. In the work context, your mind read, "We're counting on you," as an indicator that your boundary was the problem, not that they disagreed with it, that it was wrong to have it. So the second explanation was an attempt to make it right, to earn the right to have said no. And notice what you're asking for when you add another reason. You're asking them to assess your reasons and find them sufficient. You're asking them to give you permission to have said what you said. That's not a conversation between two people with different positions. That's one person asking the other to approve their right to a position. That's the speed of it. The reading arrives before the response. And by the time you're speaking, the reading has already shaped what you say. Marcus Aurelius wrote about exactly this, the gap between what happens and what you add to it. Their objection was what happened, the verdict that your no needs to earn its place. That was what you added. Their pushback was an event, just a sentence. What your mind did with that sentence, that was a judgment you made. And a judgment is different from an event. An event is what happened, yours to observe, not yours to change. A judgment is what your mind added to what happened. And what your mind adds, even when it arrives fast, is something you made. Their objection was what they said. Their objection was not a verdict on your standard. It was what they said next. The verdict, my no needs to earn its place, that came after, that was yours. Your standard was real before they pushed back. It didn't become provisional because they questioned it. What changed wasn't the validity of the decision. What changed was who you thought needed to grant it permission. Your standard doesn't need their agreement to be real. It was real from the moment you chose it. The explanation didn't change the decision, it changed who held the vote. That's the specific cost of the second explanation. The standard was real, the decision was yours. and then you explained again, and moved both of them into someone else's court. When you explain a second time, you're not adding information. You're asking them to assess your reasons. And once they're assessing, they're the judge. Your decision is no longer yours to have without approval. Think about the difference between convincing and communicating. When you're communicating, you say your piece, and you stay in the same place. When you're convincing, you move toward them. You're watching for signs they're coming with you. You're adjusting what you say based on their resistance. And once you're moving toward them, they don't have to move at all. They can just wait. The catch point isn't the feeling. You can't intercept the meaning your mind gave the pushback. It happened in under a second. By the time you were aware of the urge to explain, the judgment was already running. Catch point is later, at the second sentence, before it leaves your mouth. You can't stop the urge. The urge arrives before you can argue with it. The pull to add another reason is real and fast. But the sentence you're about to say, you can catch that. Right at the moment when the next reason is forming, before it's spoken, that's the window. Not big, but there. And this is where just stop over-explaining breaks down as advice. Knowing you should stop isn't a move. It's an observation about your behavior that arrives after the behavior. You observe that you've over-explained again. You register it. And then next time, the same thing happens. Because knowing what to do is not the same as having something ready. When the pull comes, when the second sentence is forming, your mind needs something to run toward. Not toward the awareness of the habit, toward a phrase that's already waiting. A short phrase you've already decided on, one that doesn't require thought in the moment, one that's there when the second reason tries to follow the first. That's what goes in the second sentence's place. 3 phrases, short enough that you'll remember them when your throat goes dry. We'll start with the moment they push back because that's where the boundary is most likely to slip. Step 1. State the boundary once. 1 sentence. No justification attached. Can't make it. I'm not going to be there. I won't be able to take that on. That's it. The sentence is the decision. The reasons are optional. In most cases, they're the part that opens things up. Your first sentence communicates the decision. The moment you add a reason, you've given them something to respond to. You're tired? Take Monday off and do it Tuesday. You have a family thing? Can you come late? The reason becomes the handle. They push on the reason, not the choice. 1 sentence with no handle. There's nothing to grip. The silence after 1 sentence feels different. It has weight. The same kind of weight you were trying to generate through more reasons. But it comes from the brevity, not the justification. You'll also notice the urge to soften the sentence after it lands. I can't make it, but I really wish I could. I'm not going to be there. I hope that's okay. Both of those reopen what the first sentence closed. The softening line is often the second explanation in a different form. It signals, I'm not sure my 1 sentence was enough. It doesn't need the signal. The first sentence already carried the weight. Work context. Your manager asks you to take on the extra project. I won't be able to take that on. Full stop. They pause. That pause is not a problem to solve. It's theirs to fill. You've said what you had to say. You don't need to help them process it. You've done your part. Family. I'm not going to be there for the holiday dinner. The sentence stands. Nothing follows it. You've communicated the decision. The silence after it is not unkind. It's accurate. Social. I'm going to sit this one out. 4 words. That's complete. Relationship context. I need tonight to myself. That's it. No explanation of the week you've had. No, I've just been so drained lately appended as evidence. The explanation would be optional if you wanted to share it. But it's not required for that sentence to stand. If someone who knows you well asks for clarity, you can offer it. But the first sentence didn't need it to be complete. Step 2. Use the pushback phrase. When they push back, and they will push back, you don't justify, you use one of these. I understand. My answer is still no. I hear you. I'm going to pass on this one. I get that. I still can't. The pushback phrase acknowledges what they said without treating it as a reason to reconsider. You're not dismissing them. You're not cold. You're separating their reaction from your decision. Their reaction is valid. Your decision is separate. The phrase holds both at once. The conversation doesn't go further when you don't give it new material. If you add a reason after the pushback phrase, the reason becomes the next thing to push on. If you don't, there's nowhere for the push to go. The pushback phrase does something the second explanation can't. It separates your position from the pushback. When you explain again, you're on their terms, defending your reasons against their resistance. When you use the pushback phrase, you've acknowledged their position without entering it. You're not arguing with their frustration. You're not proving them wrong. You're staying on the decision without moving toward their resistance. That's what I understand. My answer is still no, does. It holds both at once. Their reaction is real, and your decision is separate from it. Family context. You never come anymore. I hear you. I'm still not going to be there. Not. I know I've been terrible. I'm so sorry. I really want to come to the next one. That sentence hands them 3 more things to respond to. Work context. We're counting on you. I understand. I still won't be able to take that on. Not. I know you're counting on me and I want to help, but right now my plate is completely full and I'm worried about quality. That sentence is an invitation to problem solve your way into saying yes. Social. Again, you always do this. I hear that. I'm sitting this one out. Relationship context. But I wanted us to do something tonight. I hear you. I still need tonight to myself. Not. I know, and I feel bad about that. I've just been really stretched this week, and I don't want to be bad company. I really do want to spend time with you. I just need this one night. That sentence is an apology wrapped in a trade. You've handed them several things to push on. Any one of them becomes the handle. Step 3. Stop. No third sentence. After the pushback phrase, stop. The silence is part of what holds. Brief is firm. A third sentence signals that the second sentence was still open. When you speak again, you've shown that more pressure gets more response. When you don't, your position has been stated twice in 2 different ways. There's nothing more to add. The silence is doing something. It's not empty. Your answer is still present in it. You spoke twice, calmly, with the same answer both times, and then you stopped. That sequence communicates something no third sentence could, that the answer doesn't change under pressure. Not because you're rigid, because you've already decided and the decision didn't move when they pushed. The urge to fill the silence is real. You'll feel the pull to add something. a softening phrase, an apology. But I hope you understand. That pull is the same one that started the over-explaining the first time. The same urge to smooth things over, to make sure the silence doesn't mean you're unkind. It doesn't. 2 calm sentences and then quiet. That's not cold. That's a decision that held. The silence is where it either holds or slips. Let it hold. Knowing you should stop isn't the same as having a phrase ready. When there's no phrase, the silence fills with words. The 3 phrases give you something to run toward when the pull comes, and the pull is coming. Work, context, replay. I won't be able to take that on. We're counting on you for this. I understand, I still won't be able to. Silence. They may say something. They may push a 3rd time. If they do, you don't have a new reason. You have the same sentence. My answer is the same. Family replay. I'm not going to be there for the holiday dinner. You never come anymore. I hear you. I'm still not going to be there. Silence. Social replay. I'm sitting this one out. Again, I get that. I'm still going to pass. Relationship replay. I need tonight to myself. But I wanted us to do something. I hear you. I still need it. Silence. Now, relapse prevention. You're going to give the 2nd reason sometimes. Before you even realize it's happening, it's out. 3 sentences in and you're already giving ground. When that happens, you don't need to recover the whole conversation. You need 1 sentence. Anyway, my answer is still the same. That sentence regrounds the conversation without requiring you to start over. You don't address the fact that you over-explained. You don't apologize for it. You land back on your answer in 1 line. A note on what not to add to the recovery sentence. Don't attach a reopening line to it. Anyway, my answer is still the same, but I do want to talk about this more later. That's not recovery. That's postponed negotiation. Recovery closes. My answer is still the same. And then, the same thing as step 3. Stop. No elaboration. No softening after the recovery sentence. Close it the same way you'd close the first sentence. And the guilt you feel after holding a boundary, that's real and worth naming. That guilt is different from regret. Regret is, I shouldn't have said no. Guilt is, I said no and now they're upset and I feel responsible for that. You're not responsible for how someone responds to your decision. You're responsible for the decision. Those are 2 different things. The guilt is going to be there after you hold the line, especially in the early rounds. The goal isn't to remove the guilt. The goal is to not act on it. The guilt will also show up as, I should have said it warmer. I was too abrupt. I could have softened it more. Sometimes that's worth looking at. Tone can always be adjusted. But adjusting tone is different from adjusting the answer. You can hold your answer warmly. You can't hold it while reopening it at the same time. Brief and warm are not opposites. Over-explaining and being kind are not the same thing. The most honest form of care for someone you're close to is being clear about what you can actually give. Brief is often the most honest form that takes. The boundary was clear. The guilt doesn't change what you said, and it shouldn't. Scene replay. You say no to something simple. 1 sentence. They push back. I understand. My answer is still no. Silence. They push a 3rd time. Don't have a new reason. My answer is the same. And then nothing. What happens in that silence is not yours to manage. Their response belongs to them. Your decision belongs to you. You're not cold in that silence. You're not withholding warmth. You're withholding the back and forth. And those are different things. Clear is what kind people sometimes forget they're allowed to be. The conversation may not end immediately. There may be another pause, another push. But you've been in this moment twice now, with the same answer both times. You're not moving to a third place. You said what you had to say, brief and calm. That was enough. Notice what didn't happen in that exchange. You didn't win an argument. You didn't convince anyone. Nothing had to be proven right. You didn't give them a reason to hold. The decision stayed yours because you didn't move it into their hands. That's the whole difference between communicating and asking for approval. One stays. One opens. Two sentences stay. That's all. And that's it. The negotiation that wasn't. The decision stayed yours. Not because you won an argument. Because you didn't start one. That same simple no. You're in the same conversation, the same person, the same question, the same kind of pushback you've had before. Only this time, one sentence follows the first. Nothing follows the second. They push. You don't move. Not because you've hardened, because you've decided. And a decision doesn't require permission to stay decided. The conversation is shorter than it used to be. Not colder, shorter. There's a difference between those two. Cold is withholding warmth. Brief is withholding the discussion. You can be warm in one sentence. The conversations you've been having in your head after the fact, the replays, the should I have said it differently, the checking, those were filling the same gap the second explanation was trying to fill. The first answer didn't feel like enough, so you kept adding to it, even in your head, even after it was over, looking for the version of the decision that would have been accepted without question. There isn't one. Not for every situation, not with every person, and the replay never found it. It just kept you inside a conversation that was already over. When the first sentence is enough, the replay has nothing to fix. The decision was made. It stayed yours. There's nothing to recalculate. That's what changes. Not the relationship, not the warmth. The part of the exchange that was a negotiation is no longer there to replay. The person you were in that conversation before, still searching for the reason they'd finally accept, still afraid the last one didn't land right. That person is still in you. The pull didn't disappear. The pull arrives before you have time to decide. But now there's something there when it arrives. A phrase that's already waiting, short enough to say when your throat goes dry. That's the difference. Not the absence of the pull, but something there when it comes. Phrase catches the second sentence before it leaves your mouth. Not willpower. The phrase is already there. And a phrase is something you can practice until it's ready. Practice means the phrase arrives before you have to reach for it. The pull comes, the phrase is already there. 3 phrases, short enough to remember. 2 sentences, calm enough to hold. And the boundary stays where you put it. The boundary was yours from the moment you chose it. You just stopped asking for permission to keep it. And if you've noticed that the over-explaining doesn't stop when the conversation ends, that it keeps going in your head long after, that's a different loop. Same engine. Different trigger. That one runs on what someone said to you. not what you said back. That one's next. Each week, one loop, one sentence that slips before you decide to say it.